Right.
And I remember,
and we would go from chin to chin, and we would
went
make
to
up the chin. And it winds up being her jewelry.
her earrings, her jewelry, and all that.
Yeah, so she has
You
to
know-
take it all off.
Welcome to the O Brother Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
I'm here. How's it going, Dan?
It's going good, man. We're going to take you back to 1985 today. So we're going to talk about The Greatest Night in Pop, which is a documentary on Netflix right now. It came out on Netflix. It's exclusively on Netflix, by the way. So let's just say that up front. The Greatest Night in Pop. It came out on Netflix January 29th, 2024, which was almost to the day 39 years ago that this event we're going to talk about took place, which is, of course, as I said, The Greatest Night in Pop is the name of the documentary, but it's all about the recording of the We Are the World album, which was under the umbrella of USA for Africa, which was like, what was it like? But I need to see now. I need to.
Was there a
find
whole
this.
album?
There was a whole album. Now, do you want to talk about, for those that may not be familiar, what an album is, Mike? Do you want to talk about that?
I know. People are like, what's this album thing?
United Support of Artists for Africa. That's what the acronym was. Yeah, Mike, this is an album. And I have
now they
actual
still use
album.
it though. Oh wow, there it is.
This is it.
They still use that language. Like you'll hear a pop star today say the album drops such and such.
Yeah, and I think now when you're referring to this is vinyl, right? This is vinyl.
Yeah, now people would say vinyl, but
now they
still use album generically.
So this was the result of this event we're going to talk about. That this came out March 7th, I think it was, 1985, which was like 3 months after the recording took place, a little less than 3 months after the recording took place of this record, this album, this vinyl. And the most significant, because this is the full album, right, which has actually some other good songs on it by like Huey Lewis and the News, which we'll talk about, a lot of the artists that were involved in this project. This is really the focal point. This is the single. This is the 45, which of course I have. This is like,
so what's a 45?
It's a 33 RPM 45.
Okay, so
right? So revolutions
it's a smaller
per minute.
album? Is that what it is?
It's a smaller album. Yes.
Okay. But we used to have like boxes that we would carry our records. That's what we called them.
Before we had these, newfangled digital devices.
CDs and CDs are already
you
done.
Hipsters in your iPods and whatnot, But now I'm a young teen at this point. I'm just into my teen years when this comes out, and I was over this. Right, you're a little ahead of me, and I had the USA for Africa T-shirt, the sweatshirt. I had like all the merch. But anyways, before we really kind of dive into the meat of it, talk about what this was all about. What was this for? Why were they doing this?
Well, a musician named Bob Geldof had done, a year earlier? Something like that?
It was just a month prior. It was December 84
That's how fast it came together.
Right. I'm not, because he was involved in this other thing we're talking about before then, but that record, I think that vinyl, that whole thing came out in December 84.
He was heavily involved with this agency that was, trying to feed areas of the country that, had suffered famine or just didn't have enough food.
Yeah, we're talking specifically here about Ethiopia. There was a big a famine between like 1983 and 85.
Right.
That just ravaged the entire area.
I can remember Sally Struthers from All in the Family, and people right now are just like, "What?"
Yeah,
She
it's
used to do
clicking off.
commercials, and Bob Geldof put together a concert with some of his friends to raise money to feed people. And then was it,
Well,
Lionel
hold
Richie? Okay, go ahead.
yeah, but
What
hold on
else?
with the Bob Geldof thing, and
Mhm,
a lot of people may not know who Bob Geldof is, but if you look up Bob Geldof and the Boomtown Rats, that was his because he's a
mhm.
musician, and that's
Right.
the group that he was associated with back in the day. Um, but as a philanthropist, he got involved in this cause, and he ended up getting together a bunch of primarily English and Irish musical artists of the day that like U2 and
Mhm.
Sting and many others. I think Sting was part of that. Boy George, like there was a whole list of them, and they recorded this record called "Do They Know It's Christmas,"
Right.
which
Do
literally
they
to this day
know
is
it.
still played
Yeah.
every on rotation, on a loop,
Yep.
constantly, right?
Yep.
And so that
And the
inspires.
main lyric is "Feed the world.
That's
Feed
right.
the
World,
world."
that's right, that's right. And this inspires musician, Harry Belafonte,
Right.
who of course had the big hit "Day-O,
Yeah.
Day-O," which was featured in
I just took
Beetlejuice,
Beetlejuice down.
which the sequel's getting ready to come out. Well,
Right.
at least there's, the trailers. I think the trailers dropped, but
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, right. And so it inspires Harry Belafonte to wanna do something similar, right? And that's so
Mhm.
you take it from there. That's where we get into the kinda We Are the World piece.
Well, this is the
You
part of the
mentioned Li
story.
you
Lionel
mentioned Lionel
Richie,
Richie.
he
Yeah.
gets in touch with Lionel Richie, who gets in touch with Stevie Wonder,
Well,
and
let's name one of the most, important players in this whole thing, Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson, but he came into it after them, because he was like the biggest pop star on the planet, right? What year did Thriller come out?
84,
So the year before, he's got an album where an
which
album, CD,
I
digital,
have.
whatever.
I almost
Yeah,
brought that in too.
every song is a hit. I mean,
Right.
and then every video is a must see on MTV.
Well, again, it sees a lot of references, folks, for those who are not of a certain age, like
Right,
MTV Music Television, when it was what we knew it as, right? It was all just videos, and
right.
it wasn't all of these like the Jersey Shore and all this stuff,
Right,
whatever's on
now
there
it's
now.
more what, TV shows and
Mhm.
reality stuff?
I'm not sure you can find a music video on MTV
But I
anymore. I don't know.
remember when they went live for the first time.
I do
We
too.
and I know because our basement was flooded, the only time ever, and we were down trying to, with wet vacs cleaning up, and then dad built a TV into the wall, a black and white 8-inch TV was in the wall, and we were sitting at his bar. He built this beautiful bar that's still there,
Mhm.
and we're watching, the astronaut, land, and
The
then
opening of the MTV,
right.
yeah.
And at that time, there was, like, 5 videos on rotation, that's all. They had no content, but they said,
Mhm.
"To hell with it, let's start it." So, anyway, going back to the story, Lionel Richie
Yeah, Michael Jackson was involved pretty early on, actually,
was
because
he? Okay.
they wrote it together.
Right, and they were
Um,
supposed to write it with Stevie Wonder, which you
and
find out in this documentary. I didn't know that.
yeah, well, he was busy. Stevie Wonder was off actually writing music for the movie The Woman in Red
With
with
Gene
Gene
Wilder.
Wilder. Yeah, and then let's mention Quincy Jones, who's one of the most prominent producers in music history.
Right.
It's
He
really the
comes
3 of
aboard.
them. It's
Right.
the
He
3 of
comes
them,
aboard as the producer and just
right.
takes control
But it's
of the whole
really
thing.
it's really Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson in, I think, the Jackson family home in their estate. This is where they're
Oh,
writing it.
okay.
They spent a
Not where it
week.
was not where it was recorded.
No, correct. They spent a week just every day going over and over and, writing this song. But this was to again raise money in support of relief for for famine relief for those living in Ethiopia. That was the whole point of this. And of course they're trying to write a tune that's catchy, will kind of become an earworm. It's easy to
It's gonna be a
remember.
hit.
It's going to be a hit, right? And so then, like Bob Geldof did with Band Aid, which was
Mhm.
the organization, the kind of name of the group that put out "Do They Know It's Christmas?" Um, they start, okay, we got to
Right, well,
get
the
all
first
the
they
most
call
prominent artists
right, they call
in
Bob
pop.
Geldof because he had the blueprint of how to do it.
Yeah.
So they Bob Geldof gets involved and basically says, "We just called up people," and they start there was one key agent, what was his name?
Ken
Ron
Cragen.
Ken Cragen.
And
He's
Ken Cragen was, yeah, he was an agent. He was, deeply involved in
knew
the
a lot of
industry,
people.
knew a lot of people. And he actually knew Kenny Rogers. And was it the first edition? I just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in from The Big Lebowski, right? Kenny
Yeah,
Rogers, right?
Kenny Rogers sang that, yeah.
He was right. Ken Cragen, I think, was their agent or managed them or something.
Okay.
He also was a producer, I think, on the Smothers Brothers show back in the day, for those that remember that. But yeah, this is a big figure in the industry.
And knows a
He's
lot
got
of
a
people.
he's literally got a Rolodex now. For those that don't know what a Rolodex is, it's go to the contacts app in your phone. This was the physical representation of what we
Right.
now have on our iPhone. This guy had such a big Rolodex. He had multiple Rolodex files that his administrative assistants would put in a suitcase and
Yeah,
travel around with. He knew everybody.
right.
And but so
Not just
yes,
music people, but, movies, the whole thing.
mostly music though.
Right,
Mostly
well,
music
for this,
for
he
this,
was
right.
contacting musicians
Right. And so
and Dan
that's
Aykroyd
you go to that yeah.
had to
And
get
they
that.
address that. They address it. Well, actually, okay, so let's jump ahead a little bit to that. So Dan Aykroyd, who many people would know from Saturday Night Live and Ghostbusters, he's in the video. He's on the record. He's part of this. In fact, if you look at this, what's the
Mhm.
first name you see there?
I
It,
can't really I
it's
can
Dan
just see
Aykroyd. It's Dan
yeah.
Aykroyd.
Oh, right on top.
It's Dan. He's
Harry
above.
Belafonte,
He's
because
above Harry Belafonte.
right, because it's in
It's
alphabetical
alphabetical order,
order.
yeah,
Yeah,
but he was a big figure at the time,
right.
still is, but he was very big at the time,
But I
you know?
remember back then being like, "Why is Dan Aykroyd in this?"
Right, but again, he brought a certain je ne sais quoi or whatever to a little bit of a I
Yeah,
don't know. It's still kinda weird, to be honest,
right, it is
but
weird.
anyways, he's there. But mostly it's musical artists. Now, what you learn because again, I was a pretty good student of We Are the World. And in fact, I'm surprised you haven't already crowbarred this in, but we did one of the most notorious home videos of all
Yeah.
time that we ever did of We Are the World. We won't go into too much detail about it,
No.
other than to say, picture because I wish I had the
Video.
digitized. Yeah,
Yeah.
we did this thing where it was this was kind of a gag at back in the day where
Right.
right you kind of you film people upside down and their chin becomes someone's head
Right.
and you draw like eyes on the chin and a whole thing. So look it up on YouTube. I'm sure you can find
Right.
videos like
Right.
this. But we did that spoofing this.
Right.
And I remember
And we would
I
go from
remember
chin to chin, and we
we
would
went to a
make up
chin.
the chins.
It was a whole it was probably as involved as the We Are the World production.
Probably.
It was a whole thing. We had
And it took
3 or
longer.
3 or 4 of us laying upside down on a couch in our basement, right?
Yeah.
We had spotlights. Remember that old spotlight we used to have that
Yeah,
we used
yeah.
for videos.
It was like it was a favor, or what do you call it, for the bar. It was a light for the bar, but
Yeah.
it was an actual
But
spotlight.
one of the funniest things about it was dad was involved,
And
as he
that's
often
my
was,
favorite part.
as he often was. And we can maybe put up here on the screen pictures of two people in particular. One that dad represented in the video, which was Willie Nelson,
Right, because he
because
was a
dad
big
was
country guy.
he was a big country fan.
So we said, "We'll
And
have dad be Willie Nelson."
that's right. It's funny. We should have had him do Waylon Jennings, and we'll talk about that. But so he does Willie Nelson. And again, picture this. You're making the chin into the character, right?
Correct.
Dad had the Willie Nelson braids because Willie
That's
Nelson had
right.
these braids and he always wore a bandana
And we used yarn to make the
to
braids.
make the braids. He had a bandana, which was crazy funny. And then our sister was one of my other favorites. She was Cyndi Lauper.
Right.
She
So we
had
had all different color yarn.
multicolored yarn. And again, put up a picture of Cyndi Lauper from that recording session, and you'll see why we did that.
Right.
But it was spot on.
Yeah.
Just it happened to be our chins that were and
Right.
I was doing Bruce Springsteen
Mhm.
because, of course, I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan, but how do you represent that with the chin? And all I remember is trying to think, okay, I'm upside down and Bruce has this major underbite,
Underbite, right.
all right, like this.
Talks like this. Kinda
Well,
like,
upside down, you had to go the other way.
yeah,
So I was trying to go, okay, how do I do that the
like
other
Leo
way?
DiCaprio
Ridiculous.
does in Killers of the Flower Moon. He has an
A little
underbite in
bit,
that.
a little
Yeah,
bit. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So, anyways, I had to just kind of bring that up because it was so hilarious. But
And that's exists somewhere
oh, I have the
in the me
VHS tape.
Oh, you have the
I just
VHS.
need to get it digitized. Yeah. So, anyways, the whole big part of this we're talking about right now is this: how are we going to get all of these artists together? Well, what I didn't realize
We're
was
talking about the real video now, not the
correct the
home
real
video.
video.
Yes.
So this was recorded January 28th, 1985, which was the same night they had the American Music Awards, which back then was almost equal in popularity to the Grammys.
Oh,
Now,
easily,
I don't even
easily.
know if it's around now. If it is, it's kind of it's a piece of crap. But
And the Grammys is a
mm,
joke too.
well, to us, it's just the artists aren't as relevant to us. But
Yeah.
the AMAs at that time were a big deal.
Just as big, and Lionel Richie was hosting.
He was hosting the AMAs. So the thinking was, okay, this is kind of our one opportunity. We know on that night we're going to
A
have
lot of
all of these
right.
musical artists in town at one time. So they started calling all the people they knew would be there. So that was a big thing. I didn't realize it happened that same night because you're talking that show goes on, probably doesn't wrap until close to 11 at night, 10 at
Yeah,
night.
it's 4 hours at
Now,
least
probably,
back then.
California time, it's 7, 8 at night,
Correct. And
right?
Lionel Richie also performed at
Yes.
least 2
And
songs.
won most of the AMAs that
Yeah,
night.
he won like 7 or 8 awards.
And then he would then go to the A&M studios where they recorded this whole thing, where this
Right.
took place. It was a whole secret thing, right? Because a big concern was if people get wind of this,
Right.
there's going to be paparazzi and fans for days lining up. So what they did was they would reach out to the artists, send them, once they confirmed the various artists, they would send them information in the mail, say, this is where it's going to be. And they even redacted the location in the message and said,
Because it's a
don't share
huge
this.
security risk.
A huge security risk. So
Every
don't
big pop star on the
every
planet
so let me
is in one
just
room.
let me read a few of these names. Dan Aykroyd, Harry Belafonte, Lindsey Buckingham, Kim Carnes, Ray Charles, Bob Dylan, Bob Gilda, Hall & Oates, James Ingram, LaToya Jackson, Michael Jackson, all the Jackson basically, Cyndi Lauper, Billy Joel, Jeffrey Osborne, Steve Perry of Journey, Lionel Richie, we mentioned, Kenny Rogers, Bruce Springsteen, Tina Turner, God rest her soul, Dionne Warwick, Stevie Wonder, and there's more. That's
Right.
just,
And people right now are like, "I know 2 of those."
maybe, Right.
Right. We
So
knew every single artist,
every single
and
artist.
we're different. I'm a baby boomer. You're
X.
Gen X. So we're from different music cultures, really, although I think I influenced you with like
Yeah.
Bruce and some of those.
Right.
But
Right.
we knew every single artist,
Mhm.
everyone, and
Right.
they were all gonna get together. And it was interesting to me how they divvied up the solos, because there was a bunch of
Right.
there's this big chorus where
Right.
they're all singing
Mhm.
and they're trying to harmonize, and then there's these solo parts that they're filming at like 4 AM. They
Right.
finally get to the solos
Right.
about 4 AM.
Yeah, and you're right. I found that interesting too because it wasn't Ken Craig, and I forget the gentleman who was really the mastermind behind this, but he listened to like numerous recordings of all of these different artists, right? From songs they'd put out or whatever, to figure out who best to put beside each other to blend, because they each artist only had like one line
Right.
to sing,
Correct.
right? That's another thing. You're getting them to commit to this and they got like one thing to sing. So
Right,
I
and
thought that
they're
was
there all
genius.
night in this relatively small room considering the number of people you just read,
Yeah, yeah,
and the lights are hot,
right.
people are getting a little bit
They're
there's a
there.
couple of times you see some agitation.
Oh, for sure. And they're there for almost 12 hours, I think, because it ends at like 7, 8 in the morning
Yeah, when they
the next day.
leave, it's daylight. It's
Right.
like
A-
midday.
And you're right, there's agitation. So let's talk about that for a second. Cause okay, so you figured out, okay, these are the people we got. Now, what
Mhm.
was interesting is to find out who they reached out to that
And
didn't agree,
didn't get.
like Madonna.
Right,
But the interesting thing about that was it was kind of a decision between Cyndi Lauper and Madonna. And they
right,
felt like Cindy's voice ultimately was much more recognizable, believe it or not, at that time,
and she
because
also had a
and she
much
has a
higher
range.
range.
Yeah, I think that was probably more the reason. She's
Yeah,
obviously a much more talented, trained singer than Madonna is. No shade on Madonna, but
right. And
we're
Madonna was huge at the time.
Madonna was enormous in
But Cyndi
1985.
Lauper was involved in wrestling that year,
Well, she
so
had
she
Girls Just
was
Wanna
all
Have
over the
Fun.
place.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Again, these people were all, like, at the height,
at the height. Bruce Springsteen, it was the Born in the USA tour.
but he was coming off wrapping up the Born in the USA tour, which was almost like a 2-year tour.
Yes, and you and I attended that tour
Well,
several times.
this is the thing. This is the interesting quick side note is I saw him for the first time, it would have been 8 months after We Are the World was recorded. No,
Yeah,
sorry, 7 months. Because we saw him in August of '85 in Giant Stadium. But anyways, it was a who's who of music at that time.
mhm,
So you figure that out. Another one was Prince, right? Prince
right.
was, but Prince being Prince.
It was funny because they showed Prince win an AMA,
Right.
and his bodyguard is the size of a truck.
Remember that guy, yeah.
Walks up on stage, like, who's gonna attack him on
Who's
stage?
gonna tell him to not do that though? The
Right.
guy's
First of
gonna
all,
go
nobody's
wherever he
gonna
wants to go.
stop him, but
Right.
it was
Well,
so awkward.
but think about it. They were actually ahead of their time because now that is a real concern.
True.
Matter of fact, it was just a clip I saw, some guy that showed up on stage behind, was it them receiving the award for, like, Oppenheimer or something at one of the recent, it was
I didn't
crazy.
see it. Chris
So
Rock?
Chris Rock, yeah,
Chris Rock wasn't expecting to
to
get
be assaulted.
clocked.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
while
Yeah,
he
there's been
was
numerous
presenting. Yeah.
incidents, but you mentioned Prince, and to just kind of elaborate on that, the significance of it is, again, another artist who was involved was Sheila E. And she had this
Right.
big hit, The Glamorous Life. She was, I don't know if
And for
she
people
was,
who don't know Sheila E., but
yeah,
she was specifically a percussionist.
Correct. Great percussionist.
Right.
Very
Really good.
super talented. But what was really interesting and disappointing to hear in the documentary is as she came to feel, and I would have to
Right.
agree with her, they were
She was
kinda
being
using her
used. Yeah.
to get
To
Prince
get
to show up.
like, "Can you call Prince? Can you call" like, it seemed
Right.
like they were hounding her.
They said, she said, they never had any intention to have me sing a verse on
Right.
this thing. It
Right.
was all about getting him. And Prince wanted to come in and do like a guitar solo and all this stuff. And they
In
were
his
like,
separate room. He didn't wanna be around people. He was
and
very eccentric.
kudos to Lionel Richie and them for kind of holding it down to say, no, that's not what this is.
Right.
In fact, one of the biggest things that I
Lionel
knew this.
Richie calls him on the phone.
Right, and told him, "No, that's not kinda what we're doing
Right.
here." Long story
Right.
short, Prince never shows up, but one of the famous, aspects of this whole thing was over the door when the artist walked into the studio, the recording studio at A&M, it was a sign that said, "Check your ego at the door,"
And some of
because
them didn't.
some of them didn't,
It
and,
was funny because Huey Lewis winds up singing Prince's solo, right? Huey
yes,
Lewis wouldn't have had a solo if not for Prince,
that's right,
because they had the line all
and
set,
he nailed it. He
and he
nailed it
nailed
too.
it. Was really out of his range. It was way up
It was.
high.
He was very nervous,
Yeah.
but he killed
A
it.
lot
He
of them
killed it.
talked about being nervous, and these are like the
Sure.
biggest stars in the world
Right. Well,
musically.
yeah, yeah. And so again, it was just interesting to kind of learn who was kind of tapped but never showed up and the reasons why and all of that. But
And
so now
then,
cut to the recording.
right.
So now we're in the session, right? And you've got like, let's talk about Bob Dylan.
That's what I was just gonna say.
So
It
tell
was
us about
so
Bob Dylan.
I mean,
Poor
Bob
Bob.
Dylan was so timid, and he was like, what almost like he had a look on his face like, "I don't belong here. This isn't
Mhm.
my thing. I don't sing these kind of songs."
He wasn't a pop singer.
Right, and they kinda wrote a specific thing for him. I mean, everybody that got a solo got it because of their range, something about their
Well, it was
voice.
the guy I mentioned that, we can put that
Right,
note up, who was really responsible for the right voices singing the right lines.
and he literally drew their names on the floor where they were gonna stand,
Mhm.
and who
Yeah,
they
they
were
were
gonna
in
be next
basically
to.
this big circle in the room
Right, and
and
it's
looking.
just funny as Bob Dylan is starting to do his I can't do Dylan, you probably could.
"Hey, we are the world."
Yeah,
That
we are the
whole
world,
thing.
we are the
Right.
children, and
Right.
then everybody's like, "Great job," he's like, "That sucked."
Well, what
He
it
was like,
was,
"That's awful."
what you find in the documentary is you can just see, and this was footage I had never seen because I've seen a lot of behind the scenes footage of the recording of this, but over the years, but there was a lot I hadn't seen. And some of it was just him feeling like you could tell he was kind of not, he didn't, was mouthing half of the words. And of
Right.
course, so anyways, what happens is Stevie Wonder basically helps him learn how to sing like Bob Dylan. So
Yeah.
here's Stevie Wonder telling Bob Dylan
Playing on the piano.
how to sing like Bob Dylan.
Right, and
Bob
he's
Dylan
doing
goes
it
to
on
the
the piano.
and Bob Dylan goes to the mic after that and sings it and nails it.
Right, right.
It was amazing. It was
But
amazing.
it was amazing to hear Stevie Wonder play on the piano, Bob Dylan singing. He was playing it the way
Well, he was
they
also
wanted him to sing it.
vocalizing it
Right,
as
but
well
most
at
of
that
it was
time.
the piano. It was
Yeah.
pretty incredible, but there was another funny thing with Stevie Wonder where someone needed to go to the restroom, like Billy Joel or somebody like that,
Oh,
and
I
and
missed that.
Stevie Wonder grabs him and says, "Okay, I'll take you."
Oh, right,
And
right.
it's
Did a
like
couple of
literally the blind leading the blind. It was just
that
kind
was
of
a
a funny
quote
moment.
they said, yeah.
Right, and it
Um,
was a light moment at a tense time.
right, well, Stevie was a big part of that tension because Stevie wants to, at one point in the recording, now, they're probably 5 hours deep in this night, right? They're exhausted, everybody's tired.
Right.
and Stevie wants them to sing some of the lyrics
Swahili or
in
something.
in Swahili, which
Yes.
isn't the language they speak in Ethiopia anyways, so that they
Right.
had to school him on that. That created a lot of tension and you could see all the artists like, "Can we
Why are
just
we
like,
doing
what are we
this?
doing?"
Yeah.
To the point where Waylon Jennings, who anybody that if you don't know, if you've ever seen the show Dukes of Hazzard, he's just a good old boy. Never do,
Yeah.
he's a good
He
old
didn't
boy. He's a
like
good old
that at
country
all.
boy. He wasn't down with that. You
No.
see him in the documentary leave.
He's
He's
like,
like, "I'm out of here."
I don't
Now,
speak Swahili or whatever the hell you're doing. I'm gone."
what they don't show in the he does come back later on. He did come back.
Yeah, I thought he was in it.
Yeah, he did come
So,
back, and he's on the
yeah.
cover here and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
so, like you said, there's some tension, long night. You got a lot of these, like you said, some of the egos kind of remained in the room. Now, one of the funniest things I did not know
Mhm.
was that what's the singer? God, I just Al Jarreau.
Mhm.
Al
Yeah,
Jarreau
I
is
knew him, of course.
drunk. No,
That's
I
my
know Al
generation.
Jarreau,
Oh, yeah, he got
but
drunk. Yes.
he's high on wine. They
Yes.
keep bringing bottles of wine in. He keeps effing up the lyrics, and he doesn't know what he's
It's a
doing,
big
and
joke to him.
it's a big joke, and they're getting super frustrated with him, and
Yes.
finally,
And
he gets
Lionel Richie is as they bring the wine in, Lionel Richie would grab it and hide it, and they
right.
showed it. They showed a hidden
They did.
bottle.
They did. They were hiding around the corner or whatever. So
Yeah,
that was another nugget I didn't know, but
right.
we should mention too, the director of the documentary is Bo Nguyen. Did a, fantastic job. It's very, very, even if you're not of the age or of that generation or whatever, you weren't there to witness it or live it. It's kind of fascinating. And, what you find is, of course, this very quickly after spawned a lot of other projects similar to it.
Mhm.
For example, and again, I remember I
Farm Aid.
li- Farm Aid is one,
Mhm,
Willie Nelson, right?
mhm.
And then Live Aid, which was a huge event in the summer of '85
It
in
was kinda like
July.
it was kinda like the Woodstock of that generation, and
Sorta,
somebody
yeah.
even said that, in
And
a
this was
Live Aid
Yeah,
special.
and look up Live Aid because I remember I taped Live Aid on cassette off the radio while it was simulcasting,
Mm.
back then. And you're talking
I
this
was
thing went on from midday
days.
all night. No, 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 it was just one night.
Oh, I thought it went on for a few
But the
days.
thing about Live Aid was that you had artists that were performing in London at Wembley Stadium,
Yes.
and then also in the States,
Yeah.
some of whom performed in both places on the same
Yeah,
day,
one
like Phil Collins
plane
was one of them.
there was a plane that could go from London to I don't know if it was California or New
Was it the
York.
Concorde or something?
Yeah,
I
the
don't know.
Concorde, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah, and
The
Phil
Concorde
Collins,
could do it in 6
he
hours,
was one of
something
those,
like that.
and they sang "We Are the World" at Live Aid. That was one of the songs that got performed at the end of that
Now
night.
by then, I'm gone, I'm in Florida, it's like being on a different planet
Yeah,
sometimes,
that's
which
true. Yeah, it's true. One of the other ones was, I think this was in 1986, and this was little Steven Van Zandt, who some might know from The Sopranos. He played
Mhm.
Silvio Dante, which was Tony
Just when they
Soprano's
thought I was out,
consigliere.
they pull me back
Got
in.
nothing to do with it, but he did do that
Well, it's a line
impression
he
quite
does.
often. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, he did, a similar thing because, of course, little Steven got very, active in politics, and that was Artists United Against Apartheid, which was the Sun City
Mhm.
movement.
Right, Pete Townsend got involved in that, yep. Mhm.
Look at how mint this thing is.
Yeah.
And,
See, now I'm not gonna play Sun City was the theme song.
right, exactly. Now, by all accounts, We Are the World, 'cause I wasn't, I hadn't looked up kind of the stats, but it was very successful. It was like the fastest selling single in pop history at the time,
Right.
up
Sold
until
out that
pretty
day.
recently. Yeah.
I never bought it.
Well, you know that I have it.
Right.
It's made it's earned $80 million, which is over $200 million by today's
Well, what they said it
numbers.
was 160 by today's standards. That's what came up on the screen.
214.
I don't know where I know they put 160 and I was like, "That's
Yeah.
all?"
A lot of money.
That's
Put it that way. A
Yeah,
lot of
but
money.
if you think about Taylor Swift's Eras tour right now, she personally is gonna make
Okay, but there's no
4,000,000.
comparison. This is one recording, one song, one single. That's all we're
Right.
talking about. We're talking about money raised from the single. That's all we're talking about.
Right,
This wasn't
but
like a tour, a band, a concert. It's got none of that.
yeah, but I wonder, like, I think of Barbie or,
Mhm.
Avatar, which made billions. And you would think I was really shocked that it was that low. I
Mhm.
thought since it was from 1985, I just thought the number was gonna be way higher.
Yeah, but I
Like, I
mean,
thought it was gonna be in the billions.
but you gotta figure once you get into a year removed, it becomes kind of old news. You know what I'm saying? It's not like
Yeah,
this thing has been
although
burning up the charts through the 90s and 2000s or anything like
although
that.
that Christmas song that that's like, as soon as you said that, I could hear it in my head.
Yeah, every year
Like, I
that's a
hear it
big
every year,
right. I
and
was wondering, because I wasn't really sure. I thought, did this really have the intended effect? And by all accounts, it did. And if you look at the state of like Ethiopia's economy these days and things, is they're certainly far from where they were at this time with
Mhm.
the suffering that was going on. Not to say that people aren't still suffering, but
Right.
at that
Now
point,
now one of the things, and again, you don't really have to know the artist, know the music to
no.
watch this, but one of the things that kinda hit me was, like, Kenny Loggins was a good example. I
Yeah.
didn't know who the hell it was
Oh,
until his
really?
name came up. Yeah.
Really? See,
Like,
maybe because I was such of the video generation, like the early
maybe,
MTV.
and even Lionel Richie, I mean, people see him on Everybody's Got Talent or something like that, whatever the
Mm.
show is. And, like,
American Idol.
but I thought that was the more fascinating part of the story, was that not only were they getting people, and of course, there's people that are not no longer with us.
Mhm.
Ironically, Prince, one of the kinda central figures in that side story, but they remembered the night, and they would talk about it, and they would go a lot of them went to the same studio where it was filmed. And they would tell a story, and then the director would cut back and show it happening. To
Mhm.
me, that's what made this so watchable. That's why I think people would enjoy it, is to see their 39-year recollection
Yeah, well, you know
of an
what's
event.
yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that makes it all the more riveting, if you will.
I mean,
Now,
if it
one of
was just, showing back then and the behind the scenes,
Mhm.
I don't know if I woulda liked it as much.
Now,
But I liked hearing the stories being told by the artists that were there.
but to your point, I found one of the most fascinating recountings of the event was from
The
one of the
camera guy.
cameramen that were
Yeah, I
there.
knew you were gonna say that. Yep.
This guy, first of all, fast forward, he finds out at the end of this long saga, he's
He's
not
not
getting
getting
paid
paid.
jack shit. They tell him you're volunteering. Okay, I'm sure all the others there, I mean, they're doing just fine. They couldn't peel off a couple C notes for this guy,
Right, for the photographer.
Right. I suppose that would be in bad taste, but he had just, I mean, and you see him in it.
Right, and
So
he's
when he's
saying
saying, "Hey, I'm right at the footsteps of Steve Perry from Journey singing this line," you see
right,
him there in front of Steve Perry. That is pretty fascinating.
and,
Pretty fascinating.
he described saying, "I can't believe I'm getting paid for, being 2
right?
inches from Bruce
I
Springsteen.
can't imagine how that must have felt. I mean, and it's, and the fact that they thought enough to um, record it for posterity's sake,
Well,
to
that plus
have all of it was for the video. It was
they
for the
were
video,
making a music video that was
which is
released,
yeah.
but there's a whole video, and that played on MTV for a while,
Oh, more than a
and,
while. Yeah.
you know but I thought seeing it in the moment was much more impressive to see the voices, like, because you hear it when you watch the video or you listen to it, it's all mixed and arranged by
Oh, yeah.
Quincy Jones, so it sounds
Right.
great, but to hear Kenny Loggins or to hear Huey
And
Lewis
they do
hit
sound
that
great.
high, they sound phenomenal.
Even Cyndi Lauper. I mean,
She
she and she
sounded great. Remember, and the funny thing, she's doing her part, and they're like, "There's noise,
there's
cut, noise.
yeah, like
What's the
4 times
noise?"
kept
And they're looking around like, and it winds up being her jewelry.
her earrings, her jewelry, and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, so she has
You
to
know,
take it all off.
there's a lot of there's artists it's a good album, this album, actually. There's
I
9 unreleased songs on it, which,
Mhm.
like Bruce, for example, Bruce and the E Street Band have Trapped on it,
Okay.
which I'm sure you didn't know. Tina Turner has Total Control. Prince and the Revolution had For the Tears in Your Eyes on there. So he did contribute to the
Right.
project. Steve Perry, Huey Lewis, Trouble in Paradise, great
I
song.
don't think Prince was being snooty, like, "I'm above that." It just
Mm,
wasn't his thing. He's an eccentric dude.
which is kind of being well, wait, he's being eccentric.
Right, and
It's
he doesn't
Prince.
like to be around people, and he's kind
Eh,
of,
I wouldn't say he didn't like to be around people. He was
well,
notorious for throwing parties at
yeah, but that's
Paisley
different.
Park, you know.
Yeah, that's a little different.
Is it though? I don't know.
I don't know, I thought so, and he's more of a what's the word I'm looking for? Like Howard Hughes. A
Recluse?
recluse, yeah, he's more of a recluse.
Yeah. Yeah, I
In
suppose.
fact,
Sure.
they were shocked. I remember watching a Saturday Night Live documentary
Mm.
where Prince went to the after party and performed, and they
Yeah,
were all,
right.
like, blown away,
Right, right.
because they didn't expect him to show up.
Well, it's a great historical record, pardon the pun, and again, this was, near and dear to my heart, and, uh, it's so to see this kind of yeah, to see, as you mentioned, a lot of the people that were there recounting their experience with it, and and then the artists were going around at one point, and they eventually broke the ice, started getting autographs of each
Mhm.
other, and all that sort of stuff, and
Yeah, who
it
was
was
the
very
first one?
fascinating.
It was really interesting, the first one that broke the ice.
Was it Lionel? I don't know.
No, it was a woman, and she went to somebody you wouldn't expect,
Oh,
like, here's
well,
all these
Sheila.
huge stars.
Well, they started going to Sheila E. too, and she's like, "They want my autograph?" She was
Yeah,
kind of taken
yeah.
aback by it, but
But eventually, it was all like a group session of signing
yeah,
stuff.
and there's people that were involved in the project that aren't on the album, like aren't on the song, like Latoya, like all the Jacksons were there. Like if
Right.
you look at the photo that I held up on the cover of the album, there's a lot of other people that you don't see in the documentary
Mhm.
that were there. Like Bette Midler, I don't think we saw her, but
No.
she was there. Diana Ross, of course, was part
Mhm.
of it, and Paul Simon, and just an
Yeah, Paul
amazing,
Simon was there.
and all
No
of
Art Garfunkel.
it was Huey Lewis and the News were there.
Were they there?
They were there. Yeah.
I only saw Huey.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. So,
And like I said, that's the least of the, enjoyment of this is, you know, "Oh, that's who, and that look at that."
mhm,
It's more about the group dynamic
yeah.
of these really famous people in this tight space for
Right.
hours, trying to literally do good.
And before we wrap it up, that's one of the things I wanted to kind of speculate about now is Could you do that now? Have we seen that recently? Would
No.
it would it be as authentic or genuine in its purpose, in its objective? I mean, checking your ego at the door, that whole thing. I mean,
I think
I
it's
don't know.
more like
What would that
like
look like
I
today?
mentioned Taylor Swift, and I
Sure.
have every belief in my soul that she gives money to many charities,
Oh, absolutely.
But,
And that
like,
she
she'd
would
be a perfect example of somebody that you would want in that room.
and I think she would show up.
Oh, she would,
I think she would show
but
up. Yeah, so again, felt so connected to this, having lived through it. So to see this documentary,
yeah, it's
I would
fascinating.
encourage, I definitely recommend it. It's on Netflix exclusively. So if you have Netflix, check it out. And
It's
I
a
hadn't
great
listened. I listened to it, of course, digitally this morning. I haven't listened to that song in years.
yeah, me either. Seriously?
Yeah, figure of speech.
Mm, yeah,
See
okay.
if they get that reference.
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, anything else to say about the greatest
No,
night in
just like
pop?
it's a fascinating group dynamic.
Mhm.
That's what you're watching. You're
It
watching group dynamics
it really is.
live and unfiltered.
There you go. Just kinda like this, recording of this podcast. All right, folks. Well, listen, there you go. The Greatest Night in Pop. It's exclusively on Netflix. Check it out. It's definitely a fascinating watch. But that's going to do it for another episode of the O Brother Podcast. I've been your host, Dan Smith. My Simon is always my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith. And we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.